Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Peter Jennings, and I go by CSURAM88 across the daily fantasy industry. And I'm pumped to be back again here at FantasyLabs doing a lineup review for Week 11. Was an interesting week. Had a great week in cash games. Did okay in some tournaments and did poorly in others. Definitely a lower scoring week and a lot of weather conditions to deal with. So that was a big part of the thought process. And excited to be reviewing a lineup with a very interesting structure, and I think it leads to some good conversation. This is the King of the Beach round one final. So you had to win your way in. You had to qualify your way in through 5-entry max qualifiers, which I thought was pretty cool. And basically from there, you had to advance to the top 50. So you can see the payout structure here. Basically, it was an online thing where the next 50 get to go to the Bahamas. And so basically, you really want to finish, in the top 50. There's a huge incentive, a lot more equity in those spots than the other finishing positions, and just plays differently. It doesn't play like a cash game exactly because you still have to finish essentially in the top, a little more than a third, but you still have a lot of opportunity, and there's no difference between first and 50th place. So I took kind of a cash game approach, but with some correlation, and I think the field was really interesting. I will not be making it out to the Bahamas. I've seen a couple Fantasy Lab subscribers tweet at me saying that they are going out. Jonathan Bales will be out there representing, though, and you definitely should say hi to him if you guys are fans of Fantasy Labs or anything like that. Also, if you have any feedback on what you'd like to see us do better, Jonathan always loves to hear that, as do I. Hit me up on Twitter or whatever. Want to always get feedback on how we can help you guys out at Fantasy Labs or with these lineup reviews going forward. So let's take a look here at my team. I went with an Andrew Luck stack. I finished 11th, was up there towards the top most of the day until Kirk Cousins went off, who was originally going to be my big cash game and tournament quarterback. If you watched my model preview last week, I talked extensively about Kirk Cousins as my favorite play, but the huge wins got me off him in a lot of spots. So I went with Andrew Luck here, who looked like he was going to have a huge game, had a really poor second half, ended up because he had a concussion. I thought he was a really good play given the circumstance. I used him a lot more on FanDuel than I did DraftKings originally. But because of the weather concerns around the league, I decided to take Andrew Luck in a really good spot where I thought the Colts could put up a ton of points. I went with Le'Veon Bell in this spot too, was never considered fading him. He was the most highly owned player in this field, and for good reason. 53% makes a ton of sense. Probably should have been more heavily owned in this format. He was the best play on the board, highest raw projection, and don't need to spend too much time there. Todd Gurley was a unique play, and I wasn't really sure. Todd Gurley and Theo Riddick were ranking really similarly to me in my model, and I ended up going Todd Gurley in this spot because I knew he was healthy. And I thought there was a really good chance at home here that the Rams defense could play well, which would correlate good for Gurley. And at that price of $5K, I mean, you look at his game log, he obviously hasn't had good touchdown equity really at all. But he's still getting a lot of opportunity. And you're not going to find many guys at this price with that much opportunity at home in a spot where I like the defense. So that was the thinking behind him. It definitely was a challenging week in terms of roster construction. And I thought that was cool that we had a lot more variety in lineups this week. Good job by DraftKings on the pricing. Tyreek Hill, who I had a ton of. I love Tyreek Hill in this spot. One of my biggest regrets was not having enough of him in Week 10. Didn't really pan out exactly right, but he got a lot of opportunity. You looked here before, I mean, so many targets in other spots. And, he had a good game. He had 10 points, obviously, which isn't, fantastic, but that price didn't kill you. And, yeah, I thought it was a really good play given the opportunity and the spot against Tampa Bay. I shouldn't say he had a good game. He had an average game, so I can't complain about that. T.Y. Hilton I stacked with Andrew Luck. Ran it back with Rashard Matthews. Thought that was a really good correlation play. I also like Delaney Walker, who didn't end up having a good game, and Moncrief as well. But I decided in this particular lineup to go T.Y. Hilton, Rashard Matthews for the game stack. And then I went Eric Ebron, who came in at 3.9% because all the ownership was soaked up by Martellus Bennett. I actually liked Ebron heads up over Martellus Bennett. I used him a ton in my cash games as well. That was one of the things that really worked out for me on the week. Bennett certainly was a good play, but I had some concerns about how they would utilize Bennett in that spot. given the health of Rob Gronkowski. They really want to keep him healthy, and there's a lot of reasons for him to block or not run as many pass routes. So but there's more upside with Ebron. He's had a ton of opportunity, a ton of targets, and I just think he's a phenomenal athlete, and that was a great spot against the Jaguars, who I thought would have good success against the receivers. The Jaguars have very good cornerbacks, and I thought it was a good spot to target their passing game with a tight end. When CJ Prosise, who looked like he was going to have a monster game, got hurt, that stunk, obviously, but I like the play. I know a lot of people got down on him towards the end of the week with Rawls, but on DraftKings, I thought he was just way too cheap, and the involvement in the passing game was what really buoyed his floor, and I thought he was a great play. And then with Chiefs defense, and one thing I want to point out is I had Tyreek Hill and Chiefs D together, which has the double dip potential when Tyreek Hill gets a return touchdown, which I think he is more upside than anyone in the league to get those. Fortunately, it hasn't panned out. He's had multiple called back, but he's a freak athlete, which is why I call him Ty Freak. And I thought the Chiefs D was a fantastic play against Jameis. If you look at their game log, I mean, the Chiefs have put up just incredible fantasy performances almost every game. I mean, before this, they had 5 straight double-digit point games, and they also obviously went off against the Jets, which was my best week of the year when I had a ton of Chiefs D when they went for 35 fantasy points. And, I just thought it was a really, really good spot for Chiefs D. So it didn't end up coming to fruition. I had them all over the industry, and they were pretty heavily owned. Let's take a look real quick at the number one team. Fear the Turtle went with Brady, Le'Veon, David Johnson. And David Johnson at 6% was the key to winning tournaments this week. Julian Edelman, Pierre Garçon, Tyreek Hill, Zach Miller, Bennett, and Dolphins. So saved money with going 2 tight ends with a tight end in the flex, and was able to have David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, and Brady. Also saved with Tyreek Hill and Pierre Garçon. So great team by Fear the Turtle 7. And good luck to everyone who advanced into the top 50 of this King of the Beach round. Sad I'm not going to the Bahamas, but it should be a really good time for those involved. DraftKings always holds awesome live events. All right, so let's take a look here at the Millionaire Maker and my teams. And I struggled with my 150 teams this week. If we look through all my lineups, you can see here a lot of bad teams. But I was happy with my process. I got off a ton of Kirk Cousins with the wind, pivoted to a ton of Tom Brady, which could have really been huge if he would have gotten a little bit more opportunity from a game flow standpoint, and the weather wouldn't have been as bad. But I feel really good about the process of fading the wind, and I want to review my best and my worst lineup. So my best team was Brady, Bell, Gurley, Baldwin, Edelman, Patton, Delaney Walker, Rob Kelly, and Vikings D. I feel good about going Patton. He had gotten a lot of targets, and I thought it made sense from a game stack standpoint. If you're playing Brady, you need San Francisco to score some ways, and I thought this was a good spot. 9 targets in back-to-back weeks previous, and I just like the spot for him. Didn't mind Jeremy Curley either, and obviously the big reason you don't mind taking him is he was mid-price. So I went with Delaney Walker in the spot. I had a lot of him. Talked about the other plays extensively. I had Doug Baldwin, not with Prosise, so a lot of that. No negative correlation really here in this lineup, and worked out pretty well. The Vikings D were obviously a big part of that. So let's scroll down. You can see I had some good teams. So I don't think my return was really that bad in the Millionaire Maker this last week, but definitely didn't have as many sweats as I've had in the past when I've done this. So my worst team here, Stafford, Prosise, Ware, AJ Green, who I had 20% of, so that was absolutely brutal. Saw a lot of other really sharp players around the industry. Had a big exposure to AJ Green, and certainly that stinks. The injuries are the worst, and that is something that you have to account for. Some of these best players, obviously a lot of these guys are showing proper bankroll management and doing the right things across the industry. But certain guys, there's no one specific that comes to mind here, might have risked too much of their bankroll this last week and had a huge percent of their portfolio on AJ Green, and that was still a good play. For anyone saying it was a bad play because he got 0, that's just being results oriented. He got hurt, and that's the risk you run when you don't have much diversification and you're all in on a player. So bankroll management is critical and something that you should be really cautious with when playing NFL DFS. You really want to make sure you can withstand these weeks where you have a really, really bad ROI. I went Marvin Jones and Allen Robinson with Julius Thomas in this spot. So just a game stack, with Stafford, and then a lot of the guys that I liked. I went Moncrief, Spencer Ware, CJ Prosise, had exposure to all these guys. And the Dolphins D ended up being one of the highest owned. I had them a decent percentage, but I was surprised to see them at 27%. I get it against a rookie quarterback, but I thought there was a lot of reasons that LA would just run the ball and really try to protect Goff in the spot. So I like the Dolphins D, but I didn't love them as much as the rest of the field did. So that was my teams. You can see here again, I made all those teams on FantasyLabs, and it's been great with the multi-lineup tool. The new tools and the new version just saves so much time, and I certainly think there's a huge advantage right now attacking these big tournaments, leveraging the FantasyLabs tools. So let's look at the number one lineup, and what a run for Moikas. I don't even know if they thought they were alive going into the last game, but had the best, the two guys you needed for sure if you wanted to win tournaments were Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson. So at the running back position, you had to spend up, find value elsewhere. And then Kirk Cousins, Doug Baldwin, Jamison Crowder, Malcolm Mitchell at 0.6%. I actually had about 20% Malcolm Mitchell, was happy with that. That was a way to fade Martellus Bennett, who was going to be the chalk, and go with the secondary option for the Patriots. Hopes he has a good game. Really close to 100-yard bonus, which would have helped a ton. Obviously, it didn't matter for Moikas. Jordan Reed, Rob Kelly, and Cardinals D. So you can see here just a total stack of the Redskins. I like this lineup a lot, and obviously it won, and congratulations. The one thing I would say about it, just from an honest review standpoint, not trying to be results-oriented, if I looked at this lineup before, I would have said you need at least a couple Packers if you're going to run 4 Redskins together. Basically you're expecting something like 40 points from the Redskins if you're playing this type of lineup, which is what ended up happening. That means that Green Bay is going to have to score and score fast to keep it going. So I would have liked to run it back with an option. And obviously there wasn't a great play on the Packers in terms of one guy, but I still think it makes sense from a game theory standpoint. So congrats to Moikas. Definitely not trying to be critical of someone who just won $1 million. Obviously had a much better week than me, but for you guys out there, I think it does make sense when you're doing these big game stacks to run it back. So congrats again to everyone who had a huge week. You can see up here Papa Gates with a huge finish, crushed the Wildcat. Congrats to those guys. People around the industry definitely had some really big scores, and very excited for next week with the Bahamas, or not next week, but the upcoming weeks with the Bahamas final. For those of you out there, good luck. Hope you really enjoy it. And as always, looking to see more Fantasy Lab subscribers at the top of the leaderboard.